Jewish men does it take to screw in a light bulb? You've heard that joke before. That joke is usually the segue to about 1,000 different punchlines to indicate that Jewish men are completely and utterly worthless when it comes to fixing household items, to building things, to maintaining things, to doing anything having to do with something going into something that is going to make something like a structure or a building or anything. Anything. And that's not to be self-deprecating. It is a fact. It comes up on your 23andMe report that we have a recessive gene for doing things that are household related, except in this week's Parsha, Vayakhel. Moses gives the order. It's a very, very quick order that every Israelite is to bring something to be used to build the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the sanctuary in the desert, that those items will be put together by the Israelites, not just brought by them, and whoever has a heart that moves them, that is to say, whoever wants to put some heart into it, can bring their items, put them together, give them to Bezalel and Oliab, who are the general contractor and the architect, and they will create this Mishkan. God says, build for me a sanctuary, a dwelling place, and I will dwell in you and in it. And so it is the one time, historically, the only time maybe, if you like the joke, that the Israelites not only combine efforts to the first ever building campaign, but really toward building it. And there is a list of items and a list of jobs, and everything is done to such perfection that this happens, believe it or not, in the building campaign. Believe this or not. This may have also been the only time in history that this happened. So the artisans, Bezalel and Oliab, have all the stuff. All the people are working. They're building this beautiful Mishkan, including the Ark of the Covenant, which our Bar Mitzvah will be talking a little bit about tomorrow morning. And it says that they were engaged in all of the tasks of the sanctuary in this week's Parsha, and they said to Moses the following: the people are bringing more than is needed for the tasks entailed in the work that God has commanded to be done. The building fund, the building completion is beyond what we need. We've raised too much money. They've brought too much stuff. We need you to do the following. So Moses says to the people, he makes a proclamation to the camp: let no man or woman make further effort toward gifts for the sanctuary. So the people stopped bringing. Their efforts had been more than enough for all the tasks that needed to be done. More people had signed up on the volunteer sheets for the different tasks. More people brought the gold than was needed, and the silver that was needed, and the yarns that was needed, and the crimson, and the tents, and all of the pegs, and the hammers. And they brought so much that Moses said, as we say in Hebrew, daikvar, enough, enough, don't bring any more. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Wow. The Midrash doesn't know what to do with this. Well, they do. I'm about to tell you what they do with it. But imagine, if you will, that you're building your Mishkan, your first ever project, and the men are actually doing the work, and they know what they're doing. The women are obviously telling them what to do, right? Because they have a vision for what it should look like. And here's what the rabbis teach. So there's a rabbi that I've used a few times, or quoted from a few times, called the Sfat Emet. Sfat Emet is contained his teachings. He's a Hasidic rabbi from the 1700s, and his works are edited by Rabbi Arthur Green in a book called The Language of Truth. So here's what this Hasidic rabbi from a couple hundred years does with this line. The people are bringing, the line is that the people are bringing too much stuff. We don't need any more stuff. Okay, so he says, Moses thereupon had the proclamation that I just read made that the people should stop bringing. Their efforts had been enough. They had exceeded all expectations for the campaign. This is the comment. He says that the Midrash, a Midrash called Tanchuma, don't worry about what it's called, says that when Moses saw the work, when he saw, after the artisan said that there was so much stuff, that he actually took a look, saw the work, saw the Mishkan, and he has an aha moment. Because it doesn't say that he saw the work of the building of the sanctuary in the Torah. It just says that he saw the work. And the rabbis come in and they're interested. Why didn't he say he saw the work of the sanctuary, of the tabernacle? Why just he saw the work? Well, they say, the rabbi here says, that the point is that the whole purpose of making the Mishkan, of making the sanctuary, the entire purpose, was to affirm not the commitment to God, but the commitment or the affirmation, if you will, of creation itself. That by creating a Mishkan, by putting in the sweat and the gifts and the donations and the heart and the love and these pure things that all in overabundance came, they were actually affirming creation. They were, as if to say, it's going to say, making a symbiosis between their work in building the Mishkan and God's work in creating the world. The point is, Rabbi, this is Yehuda Leib Alter of Ger, in case you were wondering who the Sfat Emet is, that the point is that the whole purpose of making the Mishkan, the sanctuary, was not only just to affirm creation, the creation of the entire world, but it was just as if Moses was looking at this just like God did in the story of creation and said, oh, this is good. Remember how God does that after every day of creation. God looks at it and pats himself on or herself on the back and says, this is good, that it's tov, that it's good. And Moses was doing something similar. So then Rabbi Yehuda Leib Alter of Ger brings in a little bit of Kabbalah, Madonna, Kabbalah, and he says that the Zohar, the Kabbalistic work, explains that several places that God created the world through the power of word, of Torah. There's a lot of midrash, but a lot in the Kabbalah that God doesn't create the world by blowing the wind or Big Bang, but through thought, through word, through idea. That the world is really, the creation of the world is a creative endeavor. It's not just like God snapping fingers or saying, or thinking something, but rather that it's created through the word. And the Torah itself is part of creation. It's connected to creation. If you want to understand creation, you have to understand Torah. If you want to understand Torah, you have to understand creation. I don't know exactly what that means yet, but let's see. Therefore, when Moses saw, he saw that the Israelites had set right all of the work of creation, all of doing, in fact, had been put straight. Now, I want to think about that for a second, because Kabbalah is very tricky. What he's saying is that this was the bookend to the creation of the world, which is to say the creation of the world was great, because God did it. We didn't have to do much. But this was a human endeavor that was like creating the world. It was that big. And it was an affirmation of creation, and God needed to see the people not build a golden calf like they did last week, but v'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham, that they should make for God a mishkan, a sanctuary, a place like this, so that God could dwell in them, amongst them, and creation could be, I don't want to say that there was closure, but that the idea that human beings would now participate in the ongoing creation of the world, God could take a step back, as if to say. The Kabbalah is saying, not withdraw, but sort of sit back like Moses does in the Parsha and go, wow, what a great thing, this Mishkan, this sanctuary. Overflowing generosity is the theme of the Parsha. As I said in the beginning, they brought so much stuff. Overflowing generosity that no one asked for. It's like this idea of pure tzedakah, which our Bar Mitzvah is also talking about tomorrow. I'm trying not to, step on your toes too much here. It's a good drash. Overflowing generosity, we learn from this, is about renewing creation. You want to know how to get in touch with God. You want to know how to do godly things. You want to know how to continue the acts of creation. You want to know how to partner with God in the ongoing creation of the world. It's through generosity. Not tzedakah per se, not donating per se. It's through generosity of spirit, It's taking that internal instructive and then doing something. As I talked about with a good friend this week, it's not about sitting back and complaining and making God the complaint department, but actually solving the problem, doing something about it, building something, bringing something, being generous. Rabbi Arthur Green says, an act of human giving without limits on oneself or without limits on the community is the result of pure generosity and of godliness. He says this act, the generosity, is comparable only to God's first gift of overflowing generosity in creating the heaven and the earth. Every mishkan, every dwelling place for God that we make in our lives requires such generosity of spirit. So I want to tell you that when I sit back and look at Congregation Beth Israel, look at our Mishkan, look at our holy community, when I think about those summer Shabbatot at Camp Stein in the Pearlstein Sanctuary with the Mikdash Me'at, the holy dwelling place that our campers create, our counselors, our staff create, when I think about our beautiful and historic cemetery and the deeds of love and mourning that are created there, it's good. I don't want us to take for granted on this Shabbat that we are replicating the work of generosity in not just building a synagogue, but bringing the generosity of spirit to this room, to that place up in Prescott, to that holy ground downtown, that it's us that makes it. As we creep a little bit closer to our 100th birthday, let's not take for granted each other, but let's not take it for granted how many people have and will continue to bring their hearts and their spirits and their minds and their thoughts and their truths and their generosity to make this place happen. That feeling that you get at services, that feeling that you have if you're a camper at camp, that sense of pride, that sense of being spiritual, of being connected, that does only happen in the way that it does at a sanctuary. That is, by definition, what God is. And we get to feel that all the time. So let's be proud of what we've accomplished. Let's continue to give of our spirits, of our minds, of our efforts to make this an even greater place. And let's think for ourselves this Shabbat what ultimately it means, Va'asuli Mikdash v'shachanti b'tochan, that we should build this Mikdash so that God can dwell among us. We get something out of it. And we get out of it what we put into it. The more pure our generosity, the more pure the outcome, the more meaningful our lives. Shabbat Shalom.